Hello and welcome back to MIN's India2Global Emerging Tech series. Today, we have a fearless entrepreneur with us, one who had the guts to set up a defense tech startup in Bangalore nearly a decade ago. His computer vision products go into the weapons of defense forces around the world, including the Israeli army and US special forces that require state of the art technology. The founder of Tonbo Imaging, Arvind Lakshmikumar, has a PhD from the Robotics Institute of Carnegie Mellon University. His doctoral advisor was the Kyoto Prize winner Takio Kanade, one of the founding fathers of computer vision. We begin with an interview with Arvind that we had recorded earlier. Then we will have a live Q&A session. So start posting your questions as you watch the recording. Let's go meet Arvind now. Arvind, tell us about your work with Professor Kanade on a video surveillance system for DARPA. Was that how you got interested in defense tech?
So Takio was my doctoral advisor at the Robotics Institute at CMU, and he's a computer vision person. So a lot of the founding technologies in computer vision and robotics came from Takio's labs, and he is just incredible. So it's like one of those things where you say learn from God. It's like learning from God, right? Because he'd spend very little time with you because he's so busy, but the little time he spent with you, you learned an awful lot, right? And he just you went back feeling really empowered with all that knowledge. So a lot of my background has been in building computer vision technology. So it's been building technologies for better surveillance, for distributed surveillance, unmanned surveillance, robotic surveillance, and so on. And everything was to do with traditionally all the surveillance cameras were all they were not intelligent cameras. You had a camera and you used to get data from the camera and you had to do processing on them. So one of early work which we did was to look at how can you do processing at the edge. How can you make cameras more intelligent? So you essentially have edge intelligence at the camera. So the camera can automatically recognize, is it seeing a human? Is it seeing a pedestrian? Is it seeing some suspicious activity? So Takio pushed the envelope on a lot of computational imaging technologies. And that's where we started. And that's essentially been my background over the last 20 years. And everything I do is around computational imaging.
The name of your startup is a tribute to Kanade, isn't it?
That's correct. Means Tonbo means dragonfly. So funnily, Tonbo means dragonfly both in Japanese and also in Tamil, because it's Tumbi. In Tamil, it's so Tumbi is dragonfly. And of course, I didn't know it at that time, and I knew that Tonbo was dragonfly in Japanese. And when we created the company, I wanted something as a tribute to him, and so I just named it Dragonfly. But more important, one is of course the name. The other is the reason why we called it Tonbo is the way a dragonfly sees is very different from we as humans see. Right? And we have two eyes. Whereas a dragonfly has thousands of eyes. And when it sees a picture of you, it sees thousands of pictures of you. And its brain combines all those pictures to create one high-resolution picture. And the design of our cameras was very similar. We had multiple lenses and a single detector, which is like your eye. And it combined all these different images. And there's a very powerful brain, which computed from all those images to create a high-resolution image. So the technology is very similar to what a dragonfly would see. And the name, of course, is Japanese because of my association with the cube.
Wow. So with one or two examples, could you explain how Tonbo imaging technology works on the ground?
Sure. So, the general idea, right? So you got to think about two things. One is from a technology point of view, another is from a business point of view, right? From a business, so let me actually start at the business point of view and then let's go to the technology. Because ultimately, everything, right? Whether it is UAVs, whether it's robots, whether it's submarines, nearly 30% of it by value is the imaging system, right? Because you want to be able to see the environment, you need to understand what's happening around it, and that's when you can make intelligent decisions, right? And 30% of this is imaging technology, but the imaging technology which is deployed on these systems has traditionally been imported. Most emerging markets, India including, did not own this technology at all. So we would import it from Israel, or we'd import it from the US, or we'd import it from Russia, right? And so we figured, besides India, there's a large number of emerging markets which can do with high-end, sophisticated imaging technology, which is not restricted by governments, right? Because they're not built with government money. So imaging is a very important part of whatever you do in military. The second is all the technological advancements which have been made in imaging have been made in the visible imaging spectrum, which is what your eye can see, right? And the advancements have been because there has been so much of advancements in consumer electronics, from cell phones to iPads and all your devices. So all the advancements have been in improving cameras for consumer devices. But the military guys, sure, there have been advancements, but the advancements have been very incremental. Right? They've not been, they've not really leapfrogged technology, and they have been pretty incremental. So we said, look, imaging in the military spectrum or imaging in the infrared spectrum is very critical. There are a lot of countries around the world which don't have access to it. Maybe it's a time to look at disrupting technology in that space. So can we build infrared imaging technology which is not restricted by governments, and it's available to mass markets, and it does something different from what traditional infrared imaging systems have done, right? Which is borrow from all the advancements which have happened in consumer electronics and bring them to the military space with a level of ruggedization. And so that's what we started off with. So we said, and we started looking at, what are the different technologies which need to be built. You need to build better optics. You need to build better sensors. You need to build a whole lot of computer vision, machine learning algorithms. You need to do a lot of low power embedded electronics to make them, miniature, be battery powered, be able to do a whole lot of things there. So we built all these technologies. So we founded the company in 2008. So over the last, it's almost a decade right now, over a decade. And in the last, 10, 12 years, we have built a variety of technologies, from new kinds of optical materials, lenses, which are plastic lenses, polymer lenses, different kinds of lens designs, which have been very different from traditional lens designs. A lot of computational imaging algorithms, so you can do a whole lot of number crunching and computer vision in a very small footprint. And we built end systems based on that. So we said, one is the technology which we have built. Now we need to build end systems. And we said, what are the end systems we want to build? And in military, there's no point being a one-trick pony. You need to build a large spectrum of systems. So we built systems from what a soldier would carry on a battlefield, weapon sights which go onto a gun, helmet-mounted sights, handheld binoculars, to systems which go onto missiles, which go onto UAVs, which go onto battle tanks. The entire spread of electro-optic systems. We have about 35 different products, and all of them stem from the fundamental Dragonfly imaging technology, but they are variants of products which are deployed in different conditions. And so we sell them in about 25 different countries. And Indian Armed Forces is one of our customers as well. We originally set up because our whole idea was, let's support our armed forces with more indigenous technology. Let's make sure that we have high-end technology at a price point where our budgets can afford it, as well as local support, local maintenance, which is traditionally been missing. But of course, we sell to a lot of countries around the world, and we sell to Israel, we sell in Spain, Jordan, UK, the US DoD. So it's been a good ride.
Was it hard for a startup from Bangalore to get integrated into the weapon systems of the US Special Forces and the Israeli Armed Forces?
So I think it's in fact, it was actually easier to get them integrated there than doing it in India, right? And funnily so, because I think it's a problem which, this is not necessarily only India, right? This is a problem which you have with emerging markets in general, right? And there's a saying many years back that you don't get fired for buying IBM, right? And the same thing goes in that you don't get fired for buying an Israeli defense system or a US defense product, because if it fails, you can say, sure, I chose a US or an Israeli one and it failed. But you choose an Indian system, or you choose from your own country, and it fails, everybody's going to be like, hey, it failed. Maybe, you took some money from them. Maybe you didn't do the right thing. You cut corners. So I think selling in India was a bigger challenge. And I think that is going away. People are, and I think one of the reasons why it went away is because we started selling outside. And a lot of the international customers and many of our initial international customers, they didn't necessarily buy it because they thought that the product was superlative. They thought it was great. It's the reason they bought it was, one is, of course, many of them are people whom I'd known in the past. They were friends and they were just giving me a break, right? That is the first fundamental reason why some of them actually bought it. But the other reason they bought it was because they thought that, look, here is some technology which may potentially be interesting, and let's experiment, right? And I think this experimental mentality is there for a lot of developed nations because they have nothing to lose. Emerging markets have a lot to lose, right? And if you go to them and say, look, I want you to experiment with a startup, it's not very easily adopted. And I think it's very important as a company which comes out, a deep tech company which comes out of India, to first sell in the developed market and sell to really advanced buyers, because then it's a very easy job convincing the not so advanced buyers, right? Because you can go and tell them, hey, I sold it here. And that's what happened in Philippines. We went to Philippines. First they said, hey, you're from India. And I said, well, we are from India, but we sell to the US Special Forces. We sell to Israel. said, okay, great. The US guys are buying it or the Israeli guys are buying it. We'll buy it, right? But if I told them I sell to India and I sell to Nepal or I sell to Sudan, they'd be like, hey, look, it's not really very interesting. I mean, let's go buy from Israel. So I think it's very important to be able to sell in the advanced countries. And fundamentally, the reason why you should sell it is also that people should perceive you for the quality and not for the cost or the price, right? Because buying from me because I'm India or an Indian and make in India and all this jazz and saying it's cheaper and let's buy. That's not a good reason to buy something, right? You need to buy it because for that class of products, you are offering the best solution which exists anywhere in the market at the right price point, and that's the only reason to buy a product.
So, would you say that is the value proposition of Tonbo for various defense forces around the world?
Absolutely, and our model was we said, look, you want to buy great high-end defense technology, right? You know that you're not getting this high-end defense technology from Israel. The US guys are making you dance around, and you're not getting the high-end technology. You know that you have a limited budget, right? You want to be able to buy a lot of equipment with that budget. Where can you buy advanced technology at the right price point? And the only place you can buy it right now is from Tonbo, because you're willing to support you through this entire process. We are saying, look, we are the new kid on the block. We can build technology which is sophisticated. We will support you. We're not going to come and tell you that our government is not going to sell to you, and we're going to restrain you from buying certain items because you're privately funded. We didn't take government money. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't take any government money, is because being privately funded gives you the luxury to go build whatever you want and wherever it is. As long as you're not embargoed by the UN, you can go sell it to them, right? And that makes sense. And so that's the value proposition we have. Advanced technology, export free at a price point where it makes complete sense.
Strangely, it seems to have been harder for you to make inroads into modernizing Indian defense, although this is your home country.
So I think the fundamental problem is, India has got a colonial hangover, right? It's the and not just India, right? As I said, it's with Philippines, it's with a whole lot of other people as well, right? So it's like, and I think this colonial hangover will go over a period of time, but I think our ability to, Indian customers were willing to entertain, Israeli suppliers who might be out of a garage, right? There are 6 people there or 10 people there in the company, and the customer has no clue. All he knows is that this is from Israel, right? But if you, as an Indian supplier, went to them, let's say, hey, I want to see a factory. You have the right processes. You have these certificates. You have all of that, right? Before they come and engage with you, right? And what we have told the government is, look, if you did this with everybody, I don't have a problem, right? I mean, it's a level playing field and you do it. But if you do it because someone is in India, because by default you think they should be above reproach because they're Indian, that's not a fair thing, right? It's just everybody's, if it's everybody, the rules apply to everybody. So I think it's fundamentally in our nature that something Firangi sounds very good, and that's, I think, been a fundamental problem. And I think they're growing out of it, but it's still there. I mean, it's quite. I mean, it's a discussion which you're going to have with people at every stage. I mean, every organization. So much as we'd like to say make in India, we still go have these conversations about foreign systems.
Tell us about the deployment of your technology so far in India, despite these hurdles.
So the Indian customer, have been, so many Indian customers, so this was a problem which we had many years back, right? So one is, of course, the problems you have when you are very early in your career, and when you're starting out building the systems and building products. That time it's a challenge, right? Once you're well established or the other people are buying it, the Indian customer opens out, and says, great, let's go buy it. So if you look at in India, one of the common stories I tell people, and of course the media has covered it well, thankfully, is the Uri strike, right? So when 4-para and 9-para did the strike in Uri, the original strike, a lot of the night vision equipment which we supplied to these groups went in the strike, right? And the night vision systems, the thermal imaging systems, because the Indian Armed Forces Northern Command, there are thousands of systems on the field there. And earlier on, they used to have a few hundred systems, and these were supplied by Bharat Electronics in the past. This was about 5 years back. The last 5 years, they have more than 3,000 systems deployed there. And that's because we got them these systems at a price point and at a configuration which was really superior. So they have, top-notch weapon sights, top-notch binoculars, top-notch handheld systems, all meeting the specifications of what someone in the US would carry as part of the special forces. And these thousands of these deployments makes us feel good because, ultimately, when we set it up, we said the idea was to empower and democratize this entire process, make sure that we get maximum number of equipment in the hands of maximum number of people, right? And it should not be for cost. It should be, and if an equipment can save lives because you're hidden behind something and you can observe the enemy and you can engage, you need to be able to supply that to them, right? And not because you're saying this is expensive equipment, I'm going to give it to only the more, elite soldiers. I'm not going to give it to a Jawan, right? You want to get it to the hands of everyone. And I think we felt very good that thousands of these systems have been deployed here. They are in use across, CRPF, Border Security Force, Seema Suraksha Bal, National Security Guard, Indian Army, Northern Commands, all the commands in the Indian Army, and all the different groups in the Indian Army. And I think that's pretty good. So we felt pretty good about it, and I think it's we enjoy seeing this deployment out here.
Give us a few examples of how your technology is being deployed around the world.
So we build a whole lot of systems, which is, as I said, from systems which go on what a soldier would carry on his gun, right? So a weapon sight where he can engage an enemy, to a system which goes on to a UAV to do long-range reconnaissance, to a system which is on a missile, guiding a missile system. So we build all these systems, right? So an example of a program which we did recently is we modernized the Jordanian army. So the Jordanian armed forces has vehicles which were built originally by the Italians. So this is the Centauro cavalry reconnaissance vehicle. So the Jordanian guys wanted to modernize it. They used to use imaging systems from France before. Now the French guys said, hey, listen, if you want us to modernize it, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. This is the configuration, and it's just an expensive proposition. So we told the Jordanian guys that, look, we will modernize the entire fleet of the Centauro vehicles. We will put top-notch gunner sights, imaging sights on it. And we had a program with them where over 80 such systems were being modernized completely. 80 vehicles were modernized, right? And it was the entire program modernizing. And this gives you an example of some of these countries, how quickly they do it versus, we've been wanting to modernize our BMP, we've been wanting to modernize our Arjun. And it's taken so long for tenders to come on, right? From the time we went and told the Jordanian guys that we can modernize it, to a tender coming out, to the tender getting executed and the money getting collected, is less than 2 years. I have an entire contract executed, deployed on the vehicles, tested, where the King of Jordan essentially went around. And it took 2 years to do this. And this is a tiny country, Jordan, right? And we want to modernize our BMP, we want to modernize our Arjun Mark II. And we're just talking about it, right? We've been spending years coming up with specifications for the RFP. I think that's a fundamental problem. I think we talk an awful lot, and I think it's just a question of someone's got to go and say, hey, listen, let's just forget about all of this. Here's a quick spec. Let's deploy it. Let's go test it out, right? And I think it's time we do that. It's the same. We sell to Israel. We have customers in Israel, right? And our customers in Israel essentially use our electro-optic systems for newer programs on battle tanks. So essentially, we built a system. So a few years back, and I think last year, we demonstrated this to the current CDS, General Rawat, and also to the defense minister, and everybody looked at the system, right? And this was a system which allows a tank commander to sit inside a tank and essentially use the tank like a glass tank, right? So, normally what happens is if you're inside a tank, there are no windows in a tank, right? So you need to put your head out of the tank and look out and see what's happening. Now, the problem with that is the moment you put your head out, you're likely to get shot, right? And the idea is it's good for you to be in the safety of a tank, and you still want to look around and be able to see everything which is outside the tank, right? And one of the systems which we built was a 360-degree visualization system where we put cameras around the tank and we gave a heads-up display to the commander, right? And all the video feeds from the cameras came to the heads-up display. And the commander, as he moves his head around inside the tank, he sees the video feed from that particular sector or that location, because it's tracking his head and it is showing him the camera feed from that location. So he can virtually interact with his own gun. He can put his hand out, like it's a Microsoft HoloLens type of a system, where he puts his hand out in the air and he says, this is of interest. The moment he clicks in the air, the gun can slew onto that region and you can fire all of it virtually, right? And our customer there, we built a system, a demonstration system for the Israeli Defense Forces. So we came to the Indian Armed Forces and said, hey, this is a system which we built. So the Chief of Defense Staff saw it, he put it in his head, Defense Minister put it in his head, and we've been talking about it. The Israeli guys actually bought it. They bought the system, they deployed it, they took it and said, let's go, use it for field trials. And I think that's very crucial that we do that, right? When you get new technology, when you get new experimental technology layers, just take it for a spin, right? It's a new car, drive it, right? Till you drive it, what's the point looking at it or talking about specs and saying it's got a V6 engine, it's got this carburetor. It doesn't make all of that is useless, right? Take it, use it, come back and tell me that it's not good. I'm perfectly fine, right? But if you don't even use it or don't even try it, there's no point in you even making a comment about it. And I think that's something which the foreign customers have done very well, right? They've taken and adopted it very quickly. And we got feedback. It's not everything has been good. There have been things which are broken. They came and told us, hey, listen, this is not good. Can you make this better? Can you make this lighter? When you get that feedback, you can go back and fix it, right? You can go back and say, let me improve it. Let me, you're learning in the process, right? And one of the reasons why the Israeli defense industry was very successful is because they learned a lot in the process, because their own country gave them the opportunity to deploy those systems. And that gave them more expertise, right? And if your country gives you that expertise, who else? I mean, I can't go and say I can supply to the US right up front. The US will say, if you're an American, come and supply to me. I'll give you all the freedom to come and work on my basis. Your own country is the one who's got to do that, right? And if they do that and they do this consistently, you will build systems which are really sophisticated. And I think that's important.
It's surprising when you talk about these see-through armors, because last year or the year before, the Indian forces had issued a challenge for startups to come up with that technology. Were you aware of that?
We won it actually. So, so funnily, because what happened is when we landed up at that event, most startups which come there, right? I mean, many of the startups which came to that event were what we were 10 years back, right? I mean, these were young kids with a lot of enthusiasm who want to do things, right? So they've never really seen a tank before in their lives. They never really built this system. So, we had a system which was built, which was already there in the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces, right? So when we landed up at that, evaluation phase, the guys who were there, who are evaluating, came and asked us, what are you guys doing here? And we said, look, yeah, we are here because, we've already built the system and we are giving it to you to try it because you have a challenge put out and we'll give it to you, right? So a lot of our other companies which had come in were companies which were, and this is what we would have done when 15 years back. We would have put a webcam, connected it to a PC and say, hey, listen, I'm showing you see-through armor, right? And so what we did is we showed a thing which has gone onto a battle tank, which has been fired upon, along with a heads-up display and said, this is see-through armor because this is true see-through armor, right? And then, of course, the government gave us money. They gave us money. They give it to the other guys as well because they should. And because they should encourage some of these companies to, build new systems. But before the see-through armor IDEX challenge came in, we had offered this as a solution for a BMP upgrade and saying, look, we have a system ready. It's deployed. And it's, all you need to do is take it, buy 10 units of this, put it on your BMP tanks, let the soldiers try it out, right? Let people take it on the field, try, and you collect data with it. Because then you have some basis. Because if you don't do that, you don't even know what you're going to supply at IDEX or any of them is going to be useful, right? Because you would have spent that time at least evaluating it. So I think they're trying to do it right now. So let's hope over the next couple of years, we get there.
I hope so too. You even wrote an open letter to the Prime Minister expressing disappointment over cancelled orders and so on, right? What was the problem there?
So we had two problems, right? And I wrote an open letter, and then I wrote one more letter which I was asked to take down very quickly. So I took it down. Just I'll explain what both are. First one was cancelled orders. So we had an order with Border Security Force to supply, binoculars. This is thermal imaging binoculars, right? And these are binoculars where we have supplied in hundreds of units, both to the Indian Armed Forces and we have supplied to the Philippines Armed Forces. We have supplied like lots of these. It's a year-long tender. Government, there were like 7 bidders, out of which finally 2 bidders were shortlisted and finally qualified to the technical trials, which was Bharat Electronics and Tonbo. They opened the commercial bids. Tonbo was the lowest bidder. We got the contract. Right? This was in August 2019. And in August 2019, we were L1 on the contract. We didn't start doing any work on that contract because we didn't get a purchase order from the customer yet, right? Because they were still L1. They're the lowest bidder, but they've not got a purchase order. The customer kept pushing us saying, hey, listen, it's operational urgency. We need you to start working on it and start building systems. So we said, you haven't given us a purchase order. They said, hey, don't worry, the next 2 weeks you'll have a purchase order. Just start building it. So 2 weeks became 2 months. We didn't get a purchase order, but we were working on it. April 2020, we get a letter from them saying, hey, we have cancelled this order. We're like, are you serious? This is 60 crores. You cancelled an order. And after asking us to, advance, build it, start doing things, you must be joking, really. And they said, no, we cancelled this order. So I wrote to a lot of people in MHA and I said, this is a problem. You cancel the order. They didn't, and no one was responding. So I said, look, I'll write a letter, open letter to the PMO. Let's hope somebody reads it. Let's hope somebody says, well, there is some merit to it and figures out. So I wrote an open letter to the PMO saying this is a problem. And then I called, the defense secretary and everyone. And I wrote letters to them and said, this is a problem. Fundamentally, the irony of it, why this is a problem is even weirder because just before that, BSF, just 3 weeks back, the BSF former IG wrote an wrote an article explaining why BSF was ill-equipped, and if we ever got into a fight, we will get demolished out there because we didn't have the right equipment. They did this. BSF put the tender. Funnily, about a month back, Pakistan Ministry of Defense puts out a tender for exactly the same equipment. Right? So I put out a note saying we are ill-equipped. Tonbo gets a tender. Tonbo wins a contract, and by the way, you cancel my contract, and Pakistan MOD puts out a tender. So we got a call in from everyone possible, right, saying, "Hey, listen, just, take down that thing. Don't keep it up there, right? Because it's just looking odd." I said the problem is if I have to resort to meet a medium, online medium, to go and express displeasure at what's happening, that's not the right way to do it, right? Because ultimately, I need to be able to call someone and say, "Hey, listen, this is a problem. You asked me to do something." So that's been a challenge, right? And I think I think the government's got to understand that businesses, small and medium businesses, cannot sustain for long periods of time if they do not have the right kind of capital support. And if payments from customers, the government owes us a ton of money, and which is fast payments, which they have not paid. When you don't deliver products on time, you pay liquidated damages to the government because they say you haven't delivered on time. They haven't paid us for over 3 months. They don't pay interest on the money which they owe you, right? I mean, they say, "Oh, listen, by the way, we just delayed payments." That's not acceptable, right? And funnily, after we kept bothering them and saying, "You haven't paid us," they said, "Stop bothering us." Right? I mean, it's our money. I mean, I'm going to bother you because it's my money, right? And I think that's a problem.
I hope it gets resolved soon.
Well, I mean, I hope so too.
What are some of the new requirements you're seeing for defense in this post-COVID world? Any new use cases you're working on?
So one of the things which what we suggested to the armed forces right now is, one of the challenges which you have during this whole these times is that the amount of imagers which are required to be able to measure temperature, to be able to do thermal screening, right? You need a large amount of hardware because ultimately you need a thermal camera and you need a lot of software which can do this analysis to say what your temperature is and is your temperature above a certain threshold. And availability of this hardware is a challenge because you don't have enough equipment, or if you have to go buy it, every other country is trying to buy it and there's a challenge. So what we had asked the government was, we said, look, we have supplied thousands of thermal imagers to you guys. These thermal imagers are not images which are used for medical applications, they're used for weapon-related applications. But they can be very quickly repurposed to be used for medical applications. They're sitting in a godown in CRPF. You're not using them. They're sitting in a godown in BSF, right? You've got all this equipment lying around. Take this equipment out, allow us to just modify it and put software on it. So you can go put this on every building. Just put it in front of every government building. Now you'll have a thermal imager, which is a high resolution thermal imager, which will measure temperature. You can screen people very quickly instead of saying, "I don't have money to buy new equipment," right? So repurpose existing equipment for a different application. If you're not going to use this on a battlefield today and it's going to lie in a godown, just reuse it, right? And I think they've still not taken it up on the offer. We've asked them, we've told them multiple times that you have thousands of them, just reuse it. Philippines guys, we supplied the same thing to them and they are quite happy to reuse it. They said, well, we have the binoculars, it's been supplied to the police. Let's reuse the binoculars. They asked us to come and supply software on top of it to make it into a temperature sensing camera. We've told our guys to do it. Nobody's responded to it. I've written letters to ICMR, I've written letters to the MOD, I've written letters to the MHA saying you have a lot of equipment. It will not take much time. Just use it. You can use it in these times. They have not really done much about it, right? And I think I hope somebody realizes that they have a lot of hardware which can be repurposed, and I think that's something which is critical. On the military space, we continue to do what we are doing, right? I mean, we are working with a lot of customers to supply newer military systems. Many of them are our international customers, Indian customers. We will continue to work with them. But we continue with a lot of international customers because we have ongoing programs, Israel, US, and UK, and we'll continue to supply and deliver on those programs.
Last we spoke, you were setting up a plant in Lithuania for autonomous vehicles. How is that going?
That's going very well. I mean, we have a very nice facility set up in Vilnius, and government of Lithuania. We spoke a few weeks back. They said, would we consider shifting our headquarters to Vilnius, right? And they offered significant, financial incentives. Say, come and be here. You can use this as a base for everything you do in Europe. You can do a lot of things there, so the place is coming up quite well. So it's we got a lovely facility. Lots of people. We've had people go in from India. We have few people who are transferred from India. We have people who we are hiring locally there, and that's going to be our base for a lot of our European programs, and they'll all be addressed out of our Lithuanian facility.
Are you considering a move there as well?
No, we are not. I mean, much as I'm tempted to do it because it's no. I mean, I think I'm just going to do what we continue to do here as it is. So it's going to be a center which will deal with what we do in Europe. They anyway offer us a lot of benefits in any case. So whether we move our headquarters there or not, they will still offer us a whole lot of benefits, and they have been very supportive. So we will still do that. But no, we're still going to stay where we are.
Tell us about how you make your new age defense products affordable for defense forces in emerging nations. What is the secret sauce?
So see, fundamentally what happens is, right, I mean, the cost of a lot of these systems, if you look at infrared imaging systems, there are 3-4 core components which add up to the cost, right? One is the optics, the lens itself, right? Because that's the entry point for whatever light radiation. Then you have the sensor, which is the detector on which the whole thing comes in, and you have the electronics, and you have the manufacturing process on how you make all of this stuff, right? Now, we said, look, each of these things is being made suboptimally today, right? Because the lens today, people use very expensive material for their lenses. The lenses, so we designed some new material which potentially can lower the price of lens material substantially, right? And the reason we could use our material is because our lens design lends itself very well to this material. Because we can't take our lens design and use it on the older material because it will be much more difficult to use it there. So we changed the material and did fundamental lens design, which allows you to design lenses. So you can make much smaller, lighter lenses. So the cost of the lens comes down. At the detector level, the cost of the detector, the sensor, in the visible spectrum, which what your eye can see, if you look at cameras, everybody talks about resolution in megapixel and how many pixels do you have, right? In the thermal imager spectrum, as you increase the resolution, the cost goes up exponentially. So if you go from, say, a quarter VGA resolution to VGA to megapixel, the cost does not increase linearly, it increases exponentially. So increasing the sensor resolution is not the solution. So we designed a lot of optical elements and electronics around the sensor to maximize the performance of the sensor more than the resolution itself, right? So we said, can we take a smaller resolution sensor and achieve the performance of a higher resolution sensor? So we did some magic sauce there to build that, right? So we built a whole lot of technologies there. And in the electronics, people have traditionally built their own chipsets. They built their own ICs. Now that's been expensive, and you need to make your own proprietary manufacturing. So what we said is, advancements in consumer electronics have far surpassed what's happened in the military. Can we take all the advancements which have happened in consumer electronics and bring them to the military by ruggedizing it, right? So one of the things we did is we worked with Qualcomm, who's one of our investors as well. We essentially licensed the chipset from them and said, the same chipset which goes into your mobile phone, which is made in billions, can I take that chipset and modify it to use in my cameras, right? Can I license that chipset, the same chipset which Apple, Samsung, and other people license? Can I take that and can I put my own software on it? That way, I don't have to make the chip. Qualcomm makes the chip, but I can just make the software and let it sit on that chip and be able to extract that value, right? And fourth thing we said is the manufacturing process. Traditionally, everybody in India, when they do manufacturing, or every military guy manufacturing, you have manufacturing plants. So you have so much of capital machinery and infrastructure which is unutilized, because unless you have thousands and thousands of orders, you'll never utilize all of those machinery at all. Right? So we said, can we use all the advantages of consumer electronics manufacturing ecosystem and build our military systems the same way like how mobile phone guys build, right? So the question we asked ourselves is, do we want to be Apple or do we want to be Nokia, right? If you are Apple, you own the intellectual property, you own the design, you control the supply chain, you own the customer and the brand, but you don't manufacture anything at all, right? Everything is manufactured by Foxconn. Nokia, on the other hand, when they did, and they don't exist anymore for a reason, because you spend so much of time setting up your manufacturing fabs, you are vertically integrated, you own all that. Unless you have the right kind of orders and the scale of orders, you'll never be able to sustain them, right? So they said, let's invest all our money, all the capital that we have raised into intellectual property, doing design, so that you are always ahead of the curve. Forget about spending money on manufacturing, right? But I'm not really interested in it. And because I think the mistake which many people in defense and manufacturing in India, which is automotive and defense too, is they spend a lot of time on manufacturing, right? Because the focus is about, and even governments' SOPs are for manufacturing, because they believe that manufacturing can create jobs, can create large number of people, so you have a great number of satisfied people who will come back and who will vote for you, right? Because it's people. 50 engineers are not going to be able to move the needle from a political point of view, but 5,000 manufacturing guys can move that for you, right? While I support the fact that 5,000 manufacturing guys need the job, that's not a business we are in, right? My job is to have 50 highly trained engineers who can create a lot of revenue, a lot of value from limited set of people, than by having a large number of people, right? And by doing that, we can essentially reduce costs significantly and not have overheads. And that's the reason why we can be very cost competitive.
Lastly, what gave you the courage to start something like this in India almost a decade ago, when things were not, the ecosystem was just not ready for something like that?
So I have a very different attitude towards being an entrepreneur, right? My take on it is, I have fun with what I do, right? People who work with me enjoy what they do, right? And I'm a strong believer in this very fundamental philosophy that karm karo, phal ki chinta chodo, right? Which is what Bhagavad Gita tells you, right? So I don't frankly care about, I don't care if the company is worth millions of dollars or $1 billion, or we have an exit, whatever, right? All of that is fine. While building this process, I'm going to learn an awful lot of things. People who work with me are going to have great fun building technologies, right? You're going to be able to get some technologies, hopefully, if you're successful, in the hands of people whom you think you should get it in the hands of, right? If you're very successful, you'll get it in the hands of lots of people and lots of countries. But if you're mildly successful, you'll get it in the hands of at least some people, and you'll have fun doing it. That's the bottom line. Absolutely, there's nothing more, nothing less, right? And if you do this right, hopefully the returns will come in and reward will come in at some point. But if you can do any of these businesses with the attitude that you have nothing to lose, really, and if you're not doing it because your life depends on it, you do it because you enjoy it, and you do it because you think you're going to create value. People who are going to work with you are going to learn an awful lot. So people who work with us go to great grad schools. People who go on to start their own thing. So we serve as a starting board for a lot of people to do other things, and we have fun in the process, and that's good enough. So quite frankly, 10 years back, if whether we sold to all these 25 countries, or we happen to sell to just a couple of them, and then we say at the end of 5 years we have to shut it down, it wouldn't make a difference either way, one way or the other, because I think it's just the journey, and it's fun. Irrespective of the challenges, right? The challenges part of it is okay, but it's generally fun.
That's a great philosophy and a good point to end our session right here. Now moving on to the Q&A. Thank you so much, Arvind.
Thank you, Malvika. Thank you for having me.
That was terrific to hear Arvind being his candid self. Welcome back, Arvind, to the live Q&A. Let's jump straight into the first question. So it's from Puru Rastogi, founder of Movito. He, I guess, is from your university too. So he wants to know, how did you find the problem to solve for your first customers? How did you contact the defense department of another country and discover their problems?
So, Puru, I think the idea is, defense is a place where there are constantly a lot of problems being thrown around, right? So we are not the first defense company in the world. So for the kind of products which we are making, there have been other companies which have been making similar products. Now, the products that they have been making for those customers, they've had some fundamental issues, right? Either they were too heavy they were too expensive, or they consumed too much power, right? So you have some constraints to work with. So initially, at least, our whole, the premise was, can you take an existing product and what changes do you want to make in the technology to make that product better, right? So you're not coming up with a new product completely. An example would be, take an example of a general camera, right? So cameras have always existed. And you've had digital cameras, you've had CCD cameras. When CCD cameras existed, cameras could take great pictures, but these cameras were not good enough to go into mobile phones. But when CMOS technology was built, it wasn't built for mobile phone cameras. It was just built to say, can I make CCD cameras cheaper? Can I make them lighter? Can I make them less power hungry? And as a byproduct, it ends up being useful for mobile phones. So the way we look at it is, let's look at all the technologies, let's look at all the products which exist today, and see what we can do to make it better. And to make it better, you cannot do exactly the same thing which someone did in the past, right? You need to, increment, either, radically change the process, or you need to say, let me, bring in new technologies which essentially change the way, in our case, how imaging is done.
So I have another one from John T. Mathai, founder of iRove, and he wants to know, what are the initial challenges you faced in India and how did you overcome that?
Challenges in India is obviously the problem of acceptance, right? India as a country, like as I mentioned, with most emerging markets, the ability to accept a newcomer is very limited. And the only way to overcome the challenge is that you sell to an established country. And because you sold to an established country, Indian customer says, maybe there is some credence to what you have built. So the way we overcame it is selling it to, a developed nation. And that's the only way to prove, right? Otherwise, you're going to keep beating your head on these people saying, you come and buy it from me because I'm good. The only way to stop that is prove it and sell it to somebody who's, far more sophisticated, far more discerning in what they buy.
So John's and a couple of other young founders would like you to give them a few tips and learnings for fellow industrial startups on sales and biz model.
So I think there are two parts to it. One is from a sales and business development point of view, and also from a technology point of view, right? So if you're based in India, and especially if you're building deep tech products, you're already at a disadvantage in some sense, right? Because India is not known for deep tech products. It's known for software services. It's now known for, of course, e-commerce, retail, because of the scale of the market, but it's not known. So you're starting at a disadvantage. So there are two ways in which you can make sure that you are at least not respected, at least accepted in the world. Is your engineering team has to be world class. You need to be able to go out and hire people from any part of the world who might meet what your needs, right? So you need to be able to hire the right set of people. So your technology team should not be limited to your geographical location. And obviously that's a chicken and egg problem, because you need the capital to be able to do that. So once you raise money, hopefully that problem is solved. But your business development and sales team has to be people based outside. One of the reasons why, if you notice, service companies in India were successful. If Infosys were trying to sell to companies in the US by having salespeople sitting in India and trying to knock doors from India, it would be a big challenge, because it's not easy to sell into a developed market sitting in India. So what they did is they hired salespeople who were in the US, right? If you want to sell in Japan, hire salespeople in Japan. I mean, you need to speak the language. You need the people who know the culture, who can at least spend time, build that camaraderie, which you can't do remotely, irrespective of how good you are. I mean, you might be great technically, but you're just a distance away from them, and you're not spending enough time with them. So if you want to scale up business development and sales internationally, you have to spend the money to hire sales and business development people internationally. There are no ways around it.
So I have another question that connected to hiring. Just give me a second. What were the challenges you faced while hiring in India, considering that your work needs a lot of experts in computer vision and optics?
So, a lot of us, I'm not a sales founder. I mean, I'm a technical founder. So many of us who came in with this background, we came in with some background in computer vision, imaging, optics. So we understand the technology to a reasonable extent. So we're not dependent on new hires Tonbo's CTO is a very strong computer vision imaging person. The VP of engineering has built a lot of electronics systems, low power electronic systems. So our initial team of people, did not rely on new hires to be able to bootstrap and build the business, right? So if the new hires were not there, 4, 5 of us could potentially put together, and that's what we did in 2008. Put together these strawman prototype units. And the second thing we did, and I'll give you an example of mechanical engineering, right? And it's even optics. Hiring people, if you want a really experienced optics design scientist in India, or if you want a really experienced mechanical industrial designer in India, you're going to have a lot of challenges trying to find them, right? Because one is, of course, maybe they're not excited about the industry you're in, because the really good industrial designers and mechanical engineers would like to work for retail stores, they like to work for Titan, they'd like to work for watch companies and so on, right? So they have a lot of other things where they can work in. Now, if you the same goes for an optics design scientist, is that you will find a lot of people in Bharat Electronics, DRDO. Not that they are not good; it's just that they have not had the right exposure. Right? You will find experienced, scientists, but they have not been. So you not find them. You're not going to find people in optics, for instance, who are regularly publishing in SPY, who are writing papers in ICCV, these conferences, because they just don't exist, and they have not been. And their organizations have not pushed them to do it also, right? And there is no reason for a scientist from any of those agencies. They are quite happy with what they are doing, and if they are quite happy and they have not been exposed to the latest, how do they really know what's best right now, right? So you're living in a valley of the blind, because you might publish in some little conference here, but that's what you might think is the best possible available. So you want to hire at least a few people who are absolutely world class. They may not be people who are going to be sitting with you day in and day out, or not geographically co-located with you, but they're at least people on your team, right? So, for instance, initially when we started when we started the company, there are two things which matters a lot, right? One is the strength of your board, strength of the entrepreneurs and their background themselves, and the strength of the technical team which you can potentially hire, right? If you don't have them in-house, you at least want to get a few of them on board, because that's the only way investors will look at it, say, and investors also, their ability to make this decision is based on what they see and what they've heard about you, right? So the first thing they would do, right now, if we were to go start another company, they would go Google our name and see what background you've done, and say, oh, by the way, news says good things about you, Mint is writing wonderful stuff about you, so probably you must be good. And that's exactly the same logic which applies to your team as well as to your advisory board, right? So to hire the right talent, if you don't find them in India, don't limit yourself to hiring someone in and around. The guys in you can hire the best engineering talent in India, experienced youngsters, but these youngsters have not necessarily seen the world in terms of building these systems. They don't have the kind of experience. So you do need your first 3-4 people to be people who really can can go out and hold court, right? People should be able to listen to them, and then you hire the next bunch of people, and these guys will learn over the next 4-5 years, and that's what we did.
Derek Joseph Flutura wants to know, what would be your top 3 policy recommendations to make India the global hub for industrial AI?
Hi, Derek. Derek's an old friend, and Flutura is a wonderful company. They do extremely well, and so I think from a policy recommendation, right? I think there are two. It's a double-edged sword. When you go back and you think about policy recommendations in defense in the past, right? Government would say, I want to buy from Bharat Electronics, or I want to buy from DRDO, and the logic for doing DRDO is saying we need to encourage our country and our people, right? It works to your advantage as well as it works to the disadvantage of the country. By encouraging someone to buy from you because you are in India and giving you a benefit because you're Indian is a wrong reason to do it, right? And as I mentioned, you need to buy from someone because they are technically superior for that given price point. They might be able to support you better. That might be good reasons to buy, and your policies can go with that, right? So don't make a policy recommendation. We do have a lot of Make in India policy recommendations, which is okay. I think it's the idea is to try and create a level playing field, and they're trying to say, well, let's do that. So, but I think that's if you do that, then you're not really building a very competitive atmosphere, right? Which is what made people like Bharat Electronics or DRDO complacent, because they said, it doesn't really matter. We are India, government will buy from us. We are Indian government owned. We are a PSU. We don't have to be competitive. All we have to do is just show up. and that's good enough, right? So I think if you ask me from a policy recommendation point of view, the government has 2-3 things which they can do. One is you can make it a level playing field in some cases to allow newer companies to be able to just at least get things moving, right? So, but after that, it should be all equal. I mean, I don't believe in reservations. I don't believe in any of the. You should allow people to stand on their own feet. Give them at least some anchor. But after that, they've got to prove themselves, and I think that's important. So I think the policy recommendation largely has got to be from a liquidity point of view, because right now, when you look at from a capital raise, you're either dependent on venture capitalists who are, of course, a lot of them are not based in India as well. I mean, the part is deep tech companies are seldom funded by Indian venture capitalists in India. And a lot of my friends who are in the venture capital industry, when they were in the US, they would fund a lot of deep tech companies, right? So Sequoia in the US funds deep tech companies and companies which are, garage companies. Sequoia in India doesn't do that, right? Sequoia in India will probably jump onto something which is in, much later stage, or something where the technology risk levels are much lower. So I think from a government point of view, if given the fact that there are very few VCs who will take risks on deep tech, the only thing government can do is to start making places like SIDBI more professional, right? Where they can essentially say, let's start giving soft loans. Let's have programs which are very similar to the SBIRs with a larger amount, right? Because India has small business innovation research programs, but the quantum of the money is very less. So they need to start increasing that scale up. They need to start working with banks to allow banks to go and give loans, because banks, right now the problem is many small companies cannot go to a bank or to financial institutions and raise debt, right? Once you're established or you raised private capital, you can do it. But at that point, I don't need the bank necessarily, right? Because I might have other options to go to it. So there is a need for liquidity to be infused into smaller companies, and government needs to find some way of essentially underwriting that risk. And I think the biggest policy which the government can do is to be able to support a way for smaller companies or tech companies which have been validated have liquidity available for them.
And what are your recommendations to large engineering corporates in how to work with hungry industrial startups?
So it's a very funny question, because funnily, we've raised capital from venture capitalists, and all of them are, they're tech venture capitalists. And we were at the stage right now where it makes, and because we have scaled up on a lot of programs, it makes sense for us not to raise money from traditional venture capitalists anymore. It makes sense for us to raise capital from strategic investors, right? So, in 2012, when I raised the first round of capital, before I raised it from Artiman, which, by the way, for folks who don't know them, one of the few really good deep tech investors who actually have stood for 8 years, patient capital building it, right? And you don't see too many of these guys. So before we raised money from them, we spoke to strategic investors. And we went to the Tatas, the Mahindras, the Birlas, and said, look, you want to build a Raytheon or a BAE out of India. You guys have the money. We have the technology. We have the ability to hire people. Ideally, you should be the ones investing and being able to, and you should build it, because that's, and ultimately, because when you become larger, you need deep pockets and you need to be able to sustain it. But, people like the Tatas, Birlas, and Mahindras, unfortunately, at that point, they came and said, hey, listen, we don't want to get into this technology, development type of it. What we'll do is, we will just, hang around. When a contract comes in from the government, we'll do a JV with an Israeli partner or a US partner, and we will get into, the defense business at that point. That's a really bad way to do it, right? And unless you own the technology, unless you build it. Now we are at that second inflection point where we are at the same stage when we looked at raising capital. And I was thinking, do I want to raise back again? So we have a lot of foreign investors again. All our investors right now, are foreign capital, except for Edelweiss, and foreign venture capitalists. And when we wanted to raise money right now, strategics, US and Israeli strategics, are again interested in coming and investing in us, right? So you have, but Tatas, Mahindras, and Birlas, they have the opportunity to have a homegrown defense tech company, but they are not willing to pay the value for it, right? So my advice to the local Indian industries, L&T, public sector companies, of course, doesn't really matter because they don't have the mandate to go and do these kind of investments. But L&T, Tatas, Birlas, Mahindras, if you really want to get into you want to have a serious play beyond infrastructure, you want to own technology, you have to take the risk to be able to invest. And in this case, you're not even taking a risk. You're coming in at a Series C or a Series D level where all the risk has been underwritten by VCs who came before you. So if you don't have industrial houses who can take that risk and come in as investors, which is what BAE, which is what Raytheon, which is what Elbit, which is what Rafael do in other parts of the world, you will never really build a world-class business. I mean, you will do stuff. I mean, you're been around for hundreds of years. You'll probably be here for another 100 more years, but you will not be able to embrace the new age deep tech and grow with that, right? And I mean, it's just it's kind of unfortunate, but because even right now, it's only the foreign strategics who have come in and said, look, we'd like to come in and invest in you guys. And I don't want to raise money from foreign strategics because the original idea was that, it's you want to build. You're saying, look, I'm giving an opportunity to be able to build in India. We're hiring talent in India. You want to sell to the Indian customer, and you want an large Indian house to be your partner. And if they don't step up to be your partner because they are not able to put in value, or they're trying to see if they can get it at a lower value, then the purpose is defeated. So my advice to them is step up, participate. I mean, you're completely de-risked, especially when you come in at a much later level. And it'll at least show that you can walk the talk and not talk about just technology and say it's not lip service anymore.
So another question: how did you contact the defense department of another country and discover their problems?
So the question really is when you contacted, right? Today it's relatively easy because we are known, thanks to our experience selling it. So the question should be, how do you contact it when you're unknown, right? As I mentioned, right? In all humility, the reason why our initial foreign customers bought has nothing to do with Tonbo, has nothing to do with the fact that we built all this technology. All that is hindsight. I can probably say, great, we were adopted by all these guys. They were willing to take a risk because, they knew some of us, right? They were willing to take a leap of faith. And when you knock on the doors, you have people willing to take that leap of faith. And this is true and this is not just the defense department, right? So one of the things is that irrespective of what stage you are in life as a tech company, early stage or mid stage, or you're really at your garage stage, don't be afraid to write to the topmost person in that place, right? I mean, you want to work with Cisco. Don't be afraid to write to the CEO of Cisco, to the chairman of Cisco, saying, I have an interesting idea. I'd like to talk and work with you, right? More often than not, you will find that they would respond. You're more likely in most of these larger companies globally to get their CEO or their head of business development or the chairperson actually write back to you and set it up. Which funnily, with a lot of Indian conglomerates, you will have a response back from their secretary who will try to find time on their calendar 1 month down the line for you to meet them, right? A lot of the large, well-run international businesses, if you write to them, I've had examples where the CEO, I'm a nobody. I'm a small company, not really building anything. But you write to these company guys and say, hey, listen, I have a proposition. I'd like to talk to you. You would find that many of them actually write back and say, hey, let's talk. After that, if you don't have a proposition, sure, it won't go anywhere, right? But they have the courtesy to be able to respond, engage, and do that. So if you really want to go, approach one of them, just write to them. And, if you have something interesting, in all likelihood, they will at least talk to you.
How much time did you take to sell the first product to defense in India?
Probably about 3 years.
That was from John's again. And here's another one. What's your approach towards deciding what to get into and what not to, as computer vision technology could be applied to so many fields?
So, we are at that, again, back at that point today, right? I mean, we wanted to explore taking the technologies which we built because we use defense as a beachhead for a lot of our technology. And we said, look, if we can prove it in the defense market and show the validation in a very complex, competitive market, the ability for us to move it to mining or move it to transportation safety or move it to other commercial applications would be relatively easy, right? Because you've proven it in a difficult market. So in the defense market, we've been working right now. And the only reason we started the defense market, we said it's a It's an interesting market. It requires, there is modernization happening around the world. So I think if you have to choose what you want to get into, if you need to choose something which moves the needle substantially, right? Uh, if you're a large company like Cisco, unless a business is able to generate a couple of $1 billion, it does not make sense for them to get into. If you are a company which is in a Series A, Series B, and you have a business which is generating, today $5 million, getting into a business which is going to generate $50,000 is not worth it, right? You need to be able to say, look, it is generating $50,000 today, but I think there's a very clear path how this can be 5 million or it can exceed that in a shorter time frame, and you have a reason to do it. The market needs to be big enough, and your path to the market needs to be addressable, right? Defense is a space where we know customers, we have technology, there's a proof of the pudding exists. Non-defense market is something where we are still kind of feeling our way around, right? We're trying to say, look, there is an opportunity. We don't know what is there yet. We'd like to do it. We'd like to do it because we'd like to de-risk from defense and we'd like to hedge our bets. But I still don't have a clear answer to say, yes, this is the greatest non-defense market, whether it's automotive safety or whether it is industrial inspection or whether it is, autonomous, mining trucks or, space cameras, right? We don't have that one thing where we say, look, this will be the next big thing for us after defense. Within defense itself, it's kind of easy because you say, okay, today I'm building stuff for a soldier, tomorrow I'll build for a UAV, day after tomorrow I'll build for a missile, and then I'll build it for a submarine because, it's just, and maybe, after all of this is done, I'll build something for cybersecurity because, you kind of have, parts to it. But going away from it, you got to find what's the next big market. So if we are generating X amount of revenue, the other market has to be something which has the potential within the next year, 2 years to generate the same amount of revenue.
Vignesh wants to know, how has the COVID pandemic affected your main business in global markets and how are you dealing with it?
So, for most people, I would tell you, if you are a company right now, use COVID to your advantage because this is a watershed year for everyone. So it's a washout. You go back and tell people in the market, hey, listen, my revenue is going to dip this year. People are not going to be terribly angry with you or terribly upset with why it's come down, right? So use it to your advantage. On the other note, business will be bad because we can't travel. We can't, do demonstrations. There are going to be, delays in programs. We have a large order pipeline which we cannot fulfill right now because our engineers and our salespeople can't travel, can't do demonstrations. So there is going to be, an impact on our revenue. But, impact on the revenue is a small thing compared to the impact it's had on other things, right? So it's, as I said, it's not the end of the world. So it's, 1 year is bad. As long as you have a valid business, there is, a potential for it. A year is just a year. It will grow in as a blip. So 2022 will look better. So, just live with it. It's not the end of the world.
So it's time to wind up. So I'll go to the last question. Who were some of your big rivals in landing the Jordanian army deal? What tilted the scale in your favor?
So as I mentioned, the Jordanian program, so we sell both in Jordan and Spain and kind of, we have similar systems integrators in both these places. I think fundamentally when countries modernize, right, when you look at countries like Jordan and India or any of these, countries which have reasonable amount of defense expenditure and they look at modernizing, they have been held hostage in the past by a few select countries, right? US, Israel, France, Germany, and because a lot of the technologies originated there. So way you need to look at yourself when you compete and way we looked at it as a rival is, look, what can I offer which is superior to what a Thales or a Sagem would be my competitor would offer, right? Because in the past when technology was not available, when you did not have high-end technology to offer, a Jordan or Philippines or India would accept whatever came from these guys, right? They would accept 2 generations old, 3 generations old technology which came from France because that was the only thing available to them. Today, the accessibility to technology which is non-restricted is a great equalizer, right? So when you go to the customer and say, this is what you're buying, and by the way, what you're buying is not state of the art. And not only is it not state of the art, rather what is being offered to you is not state of the art. And secondly, it's not just not state of the art what is being offered to you, it's also horrendously expensive. So you go to a customer and say, I'm giving you something which is state of the art. By the way, here are my other customers who have bought it, and at a price point which is significantly lower. I am not going to put any restrictions on you because my government is very, happy to see me export. It's happy to see me do all of this stuff. There is no reason for a customer not to engage with you, right? So he looks at you and says, can I trust you over Thales? Because if I buy Thales, I know Thales has been around for 80 years. I can buy it from them. It works. Can I trust you? If he's able to trust you either because of your past experience or because you have gone there and demonstrated what you have is superior, which is why, again, I repeat, for an Indian, if you're building a product in India, you build a product in India and you keep telling the Indian customer to keep buying it and saying, I've built a great product in India. That's a bad way of going around it, right? Have you built something where you can walk up to Israel and say, listen, you have an Israeli Defense Force product and I have an Indian product or a product coming from an emerging market. Can it compete on the same ground there, right? Without Make in India, without cost, can it compete? If it can compete, the customer is perfectly fine. We sell to the Israeli Defense Forces. I mean, IDF is a customer of ours. Rafael is a customer of ours. Israeli Aerospace is a customer of ours. And they buy a product because it's competitive and it's good. They're not buying it because they have an opportunity to buy something lower cost because they can afford higher cost systems anyway. They don't have a problem with that, right? So I think our competition for the Jordanian program was very similar. It was Sejam, Thales, and the Israeli guys. And if you're able to offer them unrestricted technology at a good spec, customer, why should he not take it?
On that note, we'll wind up. Thank you so much for a terrific session, Arvind. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhavita. Thank you
for
for
all
hosting.
the questions.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.